We all know the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is complex, with religious beliefs and tensions between groups playing a major role. But how exactly does religion drive this decades-long conflict? What sacred sites and prophecies make this about more than just land? And how do religious identities shape the dispute? In this video, we'll examine the religious dimensions fueling the tensions, from the history of holy sites in Jerusalem to extremist beliefs about the apocalypse. We'll also look at how religion affects peace efforts. By understanding these religious factors, we can get a fuller picture of the core issues perpetuating this tragic conflict. By the end of this journey, you'll have a much more engaging and enlightening perspective on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. There's a whole world of discovery waiting for you, so let's dive right in. Why religion is at the conflict's core. At first glance, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict seems driven by territorial disputes, competing nationalisms, security issues, and struggle for sovereignty. But looking deeper, it becomes clear that religion plays an outsized role in the intractable tensions for several important reasons. First, the sacred sites located in Jerusalem's Old City, including the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound and Western Wall, are absolutely central to the conflict. Both Jews and Muslims have profound theological connections to this contested holy ground. For Muslims, Al-Aqsa represents the third holiest site in Islam, associated with the Prophet Muhammad's ascension. For Jews, the Western Wall is the most sacred remaining relic of the destroyed ancient temple. Even minor incidents or alterations to access and control around these adjacent holy sites provokes huge outrage and protest by Muslims who fear Israeli interference on the Temple Mount. Second, extremist factions on both the Israeli and Palestinian side promote apocalyptic religious visions that see the conflict as part of an end-times scenario or holy war. Some religious Zionists advocate rebuilding the ancient Jewish temple on the Temple Mount, which would require removing the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa mosques. Messianic settlers believe establishing Jewish sovereignty over the entire biblical land of Israel will hasten the coming of the Messiah. On the Palestinian side, Hamas incorporates into its charter the goal of liberating all of historic Palestine to Islamic rule. Its slogan calls for an Islamic state from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, leaving no room for Israel's existence. These maximalist religious ideologies make compromise on issues like refugees, borders, and statehood much harder. Third, incendiary rumors and lies spread by religious extremists work to further demonize the other side based on faith, creating an atmosphere of mistrust and hate. Conspiracy theories propagated about Jews planning to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque or seeking to annihilate Muslims are powerful recruitment tools for jihadist groups. Social media has accelerated the spread of such dangerous incitement. Fourth, the growth of radicalism among Arab youth facing bleak economic and social futures has allowed Islamist groups to gain adherents. In places where secular ideologies have failed to deliver on promise, political Islam rises to fill the void. Finally, the chaotic Arab Spring, which toppled stable secular dictators, risked overturning Israeli peace agreements with Muslim states. When the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood came to power in 2012, they indicated they would abandon the Egypt-Israel peace treaty based on religious opposition to acceptance of a Jewish state. So we see that religion plays an amplified role at the heart of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for multiple interlocking reasons. These factors create formidable obstacles to any resolution based on pragmatic political compromise between the two sides. Key religious groups involved. Let's look at the major religious groups involved in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This will give us insight into how their competing claims and beliefs aggravate the tensions. For Jews, this conflict is tied to their ancestral and biblical connection to the land of Israel. The creation of the Israeli state in 1948 represented the return of Jews to their historic homeland after centuries of displacement and persecution. But for Palestinians, this meant the sudden loss of their land and livelihoods when 700,000 fled or were expelled during the 1948 Arab-Israeli war that surrounded Israel's founding. Ever since, the Jewish people's desire for a homeland based on religious historical claims has clashed directly with Palestinian nationalism and desire for their own sovereign state. Making matters more complex, Jewish identity also has an important secular ethnic and cultural component tied to the Hebrew language in connection to the land of their ancestors. So religion and nationhood intertwine. Religious Zionism in Israel has become increasingly assertive since 1967, when Israel conquered East Jerusalem and the West Bank in the Six-Day War. As Israel settled these areas, some Jewish extremists pointed to biblical prophecy and religious texts about restoring Greater Israel as justifying their actions. This drives their controversial settlements in the occupied West Bank, which have displaced Palestinians and made a two-state solution more difficult. It has also led to provocative Jewish activism around holy sites. For Muslims worldwide, but especially Palestinians, Jerusalem holds immense religious significance. As the site of the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Prophet Muhammad's night journey, the city is considered the third holiest in Islam after Mecca and Medina. The Dome of the Rock built over the ruins of the Jewish Second Temple is another important Muslim shrine in Jerusalem's Old City. The fact that modern Jewish control and policing of Jerusalem's holy sites reversed almost 2,000 years of Muslim rule of the city has added a religious humiliation narrative for Palestinians and other Muslims. This provides fertile ground for religious leaders to invoke jihad in defense of Islamic holy places portrayed as being defiled or attacked. From the 1920s onward, prominent Muslim leaders, including Islamist groups like the Muslim Brotherhood, have used religious claims about defending or liberating Jerusalem and the Holy Land to justify violence against Zionism and Israel. This rhetoric amplified after Israel conquered East Jerusalem and the West Bank in 1967. The apocalyptic visions put forth by some extremist groups cast the conflict as part of a broader holy war add further fuel on the fire. Palestinian Muslim groups from the PLO to Hamas have framed their nationalism in religious as well as secular terms. Hamas fuses anti-Semitic conspiracy theories with jihadist ideology in its charter, using faith as a recruitment tool. Its slogan calls for an Islamic Palestinian state from the river to the sea, denying Israel's right to exist. And we can't forget local Palestinian Christians, who have ancient roots in the Holy Land and complex ties with Jewish and Muslim communities. Their numbers have drastically dwindled over the decades due to displacement from successive regional wars and conflict. Palestinian Christians make up relations between Palestinian Muslims and Israeli Jews more multifaceted. So the key religious groups have conflicting claims over the land based on sacred history and texts that drive tensions on the ground. Their religious attachments to the land and holy sites make territorial compromise harder to achieve. Important religious sites. Now let's look at how disputed religious sites in Jerusalem and the West Bank become physical flashpoints that aggravate tensions and spark violence. For Jews, the Western Wall is the most sacred accessible site, a remnant of the Second Temple destroyed by Roman legions in 70 CE. Jewish pilgrims from across the world visit the Western Wall to pray, mourn the historical destruction, and connect with this tangible symbol of ancient Jewish history in the land. But the Western Wall abuts the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound known to Jews as the Temple Mount. This elevated plaza contains the Al-Aqsa Mosque itself, and the golden dome of the rock shrine built over the rocky outcropping where the Jewish temples once stood. Al-Aqsa is one of the most important pilgrimage sites for Muslims worldwide. The fact that the Western Wall and Temple Mount, Al-Aqsa complex are side by side, with no buffer between opposing religious claims, means that even small incidents involving one sacred site can quickly ignite clashes over the other. The Temple Mount, Al-Haram al-Sharif complex containing Al-Aqsa has been a recurring flashpoint for religious tensions and violence. Alterations to the delicate status quo or security measures taken by Israel are seen by Palestinians through a lens of religious intervention and easily disrupt Palestinian access and use of the site. This often leads to violent protests and clashes with Israeli police. In the occupied West Bank, Israeli settlements are seen by some religious Zionists as fulfilling biblical prophecies and religious imperatives about restoring Jewish sovereignty over Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartland. But Palestinians see them as illegal encroachment and colonization of their land, obstructing peace and the viable state they hope to create. So the proximity of contested sacred sites in Jerusalem creates friction, while competing religious Jewish and Muslim claims over holy sites and the land drive protests, violence, and Israel's settlement policies. Religious dimensions of the conflict. Looking deeper, religious beliefs, narratives, and ideologies profoundly shape the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and pose obstacles to resolution. Some Jewish extremists promote beliefs that God granted the land of Canaan solely and eternally to the descendants of Abraham, and that modern Jews have the right to redeem the entire biblical land of Israel. This shapes their uncompromising positions on settlements and rejection of permanent sharing or dividing the land to allow Palestinian statehood. Religious Zionists see the gathering of Jews from around the world to the biblical Holy Land as heralding redemption and the coming of the Messiah. So maintaining exclusive Jewish control and sovereignty over sites like the Western Wall and biblical heartlands takes on an apocalyptic urgency. This ideology fuels efforts to assert Jewish control and sovereignty over East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and other areas of biblical Israel. On the Palestinian side, Islamist groups like Hamas fuse anti-Semitic conspiracy theory that demonize Jews with jihadist ideology in their charter. They use faith as a recruitment tool and political cover for attacks targeting Israeli civilians, claiming to act in defense of Islam, Jerusalem, and the Holy Land. Iran's Shia Islamist regime frames Israel's destruction as a sacred cause that will hasten the return of the hidden 12th Imam. Iran's religiously justified nuclear threat and material support for armed Palestinian groups like Hamas and Islamic Jihad add volatility and danger to the region. And inflammatory narratives promoted by extremists that Al-Aqsa Mosque is under attack by Israel whip up religious outrage among Palestinians as well as the broader Muslim world. This provokes riots and protests that often turn destructive and deadly. These rumors and incitements spread rapidly online, amplify religious tensions around Jerusalem's holy sites. So you can see how extremist religious beliefs, apocalyptic ideology, politically weaponized holy war mythology, and incitement over sacred sites fuel intractability and violence in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. These religious components make it harder for leaders and communities on both sides to accept political compromise. Impact on peace efforts. Given these inflammatory religious dimensions to the conflict, what are the prospects for peace moving forward? Some argue that pragmatic compromise on final status political issues like borders, refugees, settlements, and security is still possible. This would involve bracketing the hardest religious issues surrounding Jerusalem and holy sites for later resolution. But agreeing to international management or shared sovereignty of Jerusalem's sacred space remains highly challenging. Others contend that because religion is so deeply intertwined with national identity, genuinely resolving existential religious disputes is key to any sustainable political solution. Confidence-building measures around issues of religious freedom, managing holy sites, and preventing incitement could help lay social foundations for coexistence. Interfaith dialogue programs initiated by religious moderates and peace advocates on both sides have created pockets of mutual understanding and cooperation between Jewish and Muslim communities at the grassroots. This provides a glimmer of hope that the manufactured hatred based on religious identity can be slowly overcome through humanization. Reducing religion's hold on public opinion and marginalizing religious extremists also matters. Polling shows younger Israeli and Palestinian generations tend to have more pragmatic and less dogmatic religious views than their parents and grandparents. This could indicate that future leaders may be more open to secular compromise. The path forward to a just peace accepted by both peoples remains daunting. But carefully addressing inflammatory religious issues while refocusing discourse on achievable political solutions may provide a way to glimpse light at the end of the tunnel of endless sacred tension and conflict. In this complex conflict, religious beliefs act as identity markers dividing us from them. Sacred lands and sites become flashpoints venerated and fought over. Apocalyptic visions and holy war narratives make compromise harder. Understanding these religious drivers of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict provides deeper insight into core issues blocking peace after decades of mistrust and violence. While difficult, reducing religion's role while refocusing on political solutions may provide some hope of progress so both peoples can live in security. And that wraps up our overview of how religion acts as an accelerant in the combustible Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This is obviously a complex topic, so let us know in the comments if you want us to dive deeper into any aspects in future videos. Don't forget to like this video if you found it interesting and subscribe to stay updated on future episodes examining other religious conflicts around the world. We hope this video gave you a helpful high-level look at how religion influences the bitter Israeli-Palestinian struggle. Until next time, stay thoughtful,